Oh, hi. I see that you've come to learn about solving one and two-step quadratic equations. So, what in the world is even a quadratic equation? My goodness. You may have heard this word before, and maybe not. Quadratic. Okay? It sounds it sounds like I know that prefix quad usually means four, right? So, this is another thing that kind of irritates me about math sometimes. It doesn't mean four in this case, okay? Quadratic equations are literally just equations that have a variable raised to the second power in them. That's it. That's all. It's not anything too crazy, right? It's just a, an equation. A quadratic has a variable squared in it. Okay, has a variable squared. Okay, and I should also say that that's the highest exponent you have. So if I had an x cubed and an x squared, that's actually called something else. That's called a cubic function, because you look at the highest exponent you have in the whole thing. So for us today, they're all going to be squared. That's the highest exponent that I'm going to deal with here. So these are all quadratic equations, okay? So in order to solve a quadratic equation, it's actually, well, they can get very difficult, but you will learn all about those when you get to Algebra 2, okay? So for us, though, we're just going to be looking at quadratic equations that I can solve using a method called square rooting, okay? And we've been talking about square roots the last couple lessons, so these really aren't that bad. So there's a few steps that I mean, there's not many steps, but the very first step to do any of these is to get whatever variable is being squared by itself. Okay, so you'll notice in 1 through 4, the variables are already by themselves. It already has like number 1 is just r squared equals 25. There's nothing with it. Whereas if you look at number 5, for example, 5 says 3x squared equals 75. So that one needs some attention before you can move on. All right, but we'll do a couple out, and I think you'll actually kind of like these ones. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. Let me erase the stuff that I wrote up here. And let's just take a look at how this is going to work. So number 1, it says r squared equals 25, okay? So let's just, well, no, I don't want to do that yet. Oh yeah, okay, I will. If I had something like r plus 2 equals 9, right? What do we normally do to solve this? I just want to get the r by itself, right? So I minus 2 from each side, and I end up getting r equals 7, right? Easy peasy. Now, when I'm looking at number 1, though, I have an r squared. So I need to get to just r, not r squared. So think about, how would I undo squaring something? Like I undo addition by subtracting. I undo multiplying by dividing. How would you undo squaring something? And maybe you're thinking in your head, well, there's got to be a reason why we're doing this in this unit, because if you're thinking about square rooting, you are correct. So a square root is the opposite of a square, just like how addition is the opposite of subtraction. Multiplication is the opposite of division. Square root and squaring are opposites of each other. So they undo each other. So I'm going to use square roots on number 1 to get my answer. Okay, so check this out. To get just r, I'm going to take the square root of this side, but remember, with anything in math, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So if I take the square root of the left-hand side, I have to take the square root of the right-hand side. Have to, okay? Otherwise, you're violating the sanctity of that equal sign, and we can't do that. All right, now what is the square root of r squared? Well, turns out that's just r, right? Because they undo each other. So the square root and the squared cancel each other out. Now, the next part is a little bit tricky, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be fine. Okay, the square root of 25. You probably already know this answer. You know that it's 5. But if you remember a few lessons ago when I was first talking about square roots, I was talking about the different roots that there are. There's the principal root, square root of 25. There's also the positive and negative root that would look like that. And there's also just the negative root. Okay, so there's all of these. Now, in the original problem, it didn't look like this. The original problem didn't have the square root around the 25. I put that there, right? I did that. Whenever you do that, you actually have to assume that you want both roots. Okay, so my answer to this is not just 5, it's actually positive and negative 5. And that's always going to be like that. So if you take the square root as one of the steps in your equation, you want to account for both roots. Okay, and you can check them. If I go back to the original, if I take positive 5 and I square it, yep, I get 25. If I take negative 5 and I square it, yep, I get 25. So all of these answers on this whole page pretty much are going to be positive and negative, whatever the square root is. Okay, so let's look at number 3 real quick. Again, I'm going to take the square root of each side. The square root of n squared is just n, and then the square root of 1, hopefully you're thinking positive and negative 1. That's it, because the square root of 1 is 1, because 1 squared is 1. You could write this another way, just so you know. You could write this as separate numbers. So you could write it as 5 and negative 5 if you want. But it's just a lot faster to kind of use that plus minus symbol. And also, you might have seen whenever we have answers that where we have more than one answer and we're just sort of listing them. Do you remember this notation? Writing it inside of these funny brackets. So you can kind of write it like that if you want to. You don't have to. I don't need to see it that way. It's great if you want to get in that habit though. But so if you write it just like this, that's fine with me. If you want to write it like that, even better. Okay, so same thing for number 3. If you want to write it inside those cool brackets, plus and minus 1 right in there, just like that. Okay, let's scroll down to number 5 because that one's a little bit different. Okay, let's move this down. All right, 5. Let's look here. The variable being squared, the x, is not by itself in this case. I've got this 3 here that I need to get rid of. So just like with any other equation, how would I normally get rid of the 3, right? I'm doing 3 times an x squared. I need to undo that. So let's go ahead and divide both sides by 3. This is such a crucial step because a lot of students forget to, 75 divided by 3 is 25. They forget to divide by 3 first. And what they're going to do, don't write this down, but I'm just going to show you real quick what they try and do. They're going to try and square root both sides like this. Oh, 75, not 72. And it's going to be a mess because 75 is not a perfect square. You'd have to take the square root of 3 also. It is not what you want to do. Okay, so please make sure step 1 is to get whatever is being raised to the power, right? The x, the y, the r, whatever letter it is, doesn't matter. Get it by itself. And then you're going to come in and take the square root of both sides. Oops. I'm on the eraser thing I don't mean to be. There we go. I changed it to red too. All right, so I'm going to come in, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is just x, and the square root of 25. Yes, it's 5, but remember we're putting plus and minus in front of all of our answers. Okay, let's try 7 together. So I see x squared is not by itself. I'm going to start off by dividing both sides by 10. So now I get x squared, 90 divided by 10 is just 9. And now I can go ahead and square root both sides, square root u, and my answer is just, let's do the funky brackets, positive negative 3. All right, let's try 9, because that one's a little different again, but I'm still going to start off the same way. I'm still going to start by dividing both sides by 36. But now I'm here and I'm like, ooh, I don't know what 1 divided by 36 is. Guess what?
You don't need to know. Just leave it as 1 over 36. Just leave it. Trust me, leave it. Then what do you do? Well, I got to square root both sides because I'm trying to get that k all by itself. So it's square root u, square root u. What's the square root of k squared? Hopefully you're saying just k. Oh, just k, right? Not k squared. And then what's the square root of 1 over 36? We did this in a previous lesson. How do you take the square root of a fraction? Just take the square root of top and bottom separately. So the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 36, just 6. Don't forget, though, you need that plus and minus in front. So I'm going to write my answer a little bit neater over here. Funky bracket, plus minus 1/6. Okay, so it looks intimidating, but it's not that bad. I promise you, not that bad. Let's do 11 together. That'll be the last one that I do with you. Oh my goodness gracious. There we go. Okay, let's try 11 together. So I'm going to start off. I want to get b squared by itself. I need to divide both sides by 36. b squared equals 100 over 36. You could simplify 100 over 36, but again, I am advising you not to do that right now. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just leave it. Leave it. Leave it. Okay? Watch. Watch what happens. Square root both sides. What is the square root of b squared? Just b. Over here, don't forget your positive and negative roots. And now just take the square root of each one separately. Square root of 100 is just 10. Square root of 36 is just 6. So now, yes, I do have to simplify 10/6, but it's a lot easier than 136 in my opinion. So if I reduce 10/6, that's just going to be what, 5/3. And we're done. See, not so bad, right? Right? I might as well just do all the odds. So let's just do 13 together, and then you'll just have to do the evens. Okay? So let's see. We're going to divide by 100. Divide by 100. I've got b squared equals 81 over 100. Okay? I'm going to come in. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Square root of u, square root of u. What do I get? I get, don't forget positive and negative. Square root of 81 is 9. Square root of 100 is 10. That does not simplify, so that's my answer. Cool bracket, positive, negative, 9, 10. Okay, so please try the evens. Hopefully you find this kind of fun. I don't know. I do.